Brielle Carson shoved open the glass door with her elbow, balancing a large pink donut box in one hand and her laptop bag in the other, her curls still damp from her rushed shower and her coat only halfway buttoned. "This is how billion-dollar companies are run," she muttered, stepping into the sleek marble lobby of Garrison and Wolfe at 7:15 in the morning, way too early for anyone to be decent. She'd brought donuts as a peace offering. It was her first week temping for the executive strategy team just until they filled the role permanently, and the assistant she was covering for had warned her. "They're all sharks, especially the new guy. Don't be late. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do, don't bring sugary carbs." Brielle brought them anyway. Because if you're going to sit through a 2-hour meeting before sunrise, you deserve a glazed cruller. She made it to the conference room with 2 minutes to spare. No one was in yet except one man sitting at the far end of the polished glass table, sleeves rolled up, black watch peeking out, eyes focused on a file in front of him. She didn't recognize him, which was weird. She'd prepped the whole meeting agenda the night before. He looked up when she walked in. His expression didn't change, but his eyes landed on the donut box, and something flickered in them. Amusement, maybe? "Didn't realize this was a breakfast meeting," he said calmly. "Technically, it's not," Brielle replied, walking to the table and placing the box down in the center. "But I figured life's too short not to have a Boston cream at 7 a.m. His mouth tugged slightly at one corner. "You're not wrong." She opened the box, grabbed a chocolate twist, and sat down 2 seats from the end. He didn't say anything else, just watched her for a moment before returning to his file. People began trickling in, executives in sharp suits, 2 VPs, and finally, Miss Lillian from HR, who gave Brielle a pointed look at the pastries before taking a powdered sugar one anyway. But the mysterious man at the end, no one introduced him, no one questioned his presence, and when the meeting started, he didn't ask questions. He listened, sharply, intently. His gaze flicked between speakers like he was reading more than what was being said. Brielle tried not to glance at him too much, but every time she did, he was already watching her. When the meeting ended, she began gathering her things when someone tapped her shoulder. "You're not going to leave without introducing yourself, are you?" the man asked, standing beside her now. He was taller than she thought, and his voice was smoother up close. "Most people here have no interest in knowing the temp's name," she said honestly, adjusting her bag. "But it's Brielle Carson." "Brielle," he repeated, as if trying the name out. "I'm Silas Granger," her eyebrows lifted. "You're the new strategy consultant," he tilted his head. "Something like that." Before she could say more, Lillian called him over and he walked away, but not before glancing back once. By noon, Brielle had learned exactly who Silas Granger was. He wasn't just a consultant. He was the new partner, a self-made millionaire who'd built and sold his own logistics company by age 35 and was now investing in Garrison and Wolfe as a silent but clearly very present partner. And she'd offered him a donut. Brielle wanted to crawl under her desk and stay there for eternity. The next morning, there was a knock on her cubicle wall. She turned, and there he was again, Silas, holding 2 coffees. "I figured if you're bringing donuts to 7 a.m. meetings, the least I can do is return the favor when it's a normal hour," he said, handing her one. She blinked. "You brought me coffee," he shrugged, casual as ever. "I had a feeling you take it black." She did. She hadn't told anyone that. "Thanks," she said, taking it, careful not to brush his hand. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said simply. "Also, we're both on the next project debrief. Thought I'd walk over with you." Brielle stared at him for a second. "You're sitting in on that?" I requested it. Her heart thudded louder than necessary. They walked together, and the room definitely noticed when they entered. Brielle could feel it, the shift, the glances, the raised eyebrows. She kept her eyes on the screen during the presentation, but she felt his gaze on her again. And when she made a comment about the vendor logistics, Silas actually chimed in to support her. Afterward, as they walked out, he said, "You know, you're smarter than most of the people in that room." She laughed. That's not saying much. It is, he said. You see things no one else does, that's rare. She paused. You don't have to flatter the temp, you know. I'm not flattering, he said. I'm interested, her breath caught. In what exactly? She asked. He stopped walking, turned to her. You. Brielle stared at him, then laughed, trying to deflect. You're joking. I'm not, Silas said, his voice low but serious. I don't joke about people who make my mornings better just by bringing donuts. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. Over the next few weeks, Silas kept showing up with coffee, with ideas. With questions only she could answer. He invited her to sit in on meetings she technically wasn't required for. He asked what she thought about strategies before anyone else. And one evening, when the office had emptied out and she was gathering her things, he appeared at her desk again. Dinner? He asked, her brain short-circuited. As in, I want to take you to dinner, not to talk about work, just you and me, her heart squeezed. I don't know if that's a good idea, she said. You're you, and you're you, he said. Which is exactly why I want to, she hesitated. I'll make it easy, he said, pulling a small white card from his jacket and sliding it on her desk. Here's the address, 7 o'clock, if you don't show, no pressure, but I really hope you do. And then he left. She stared down at the card. It was a reservation to Elev, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Brielle had never been. But that night, she stood in front of her mirror, heart racing, wearing the one dress she owned that didn't scream budget, and she got in a cab. She didn't know what would happen. But something in the way Silas had looked at her made her believe it might be something worth finding out. The maitre d' didn't ask her name. He just glanced at her dress, nodded once with polite approval, and led her past crystal chandeliers and velvet booths to a table set for two against a wall of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the skyline. Silas was already there. Jacket off, sleeves cuffed neatly, tie gone. He stood when she approached. I was starting to think you wouldn't come, he said, pulling out her chair. I was starting to think I shouldn't, Brielle replied, sitting down carefully, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. You look. He stopped. Not because he didn't have the words, but because he wanted to choose them deliberately. Like you don't belong here, and I mean that as the highest compliment, she blinked. Thanks, I think, he leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. This place is all smoke and mirrors. You're not. The waiter appeared, filling their glasses with water and offering the wine menu. Silas didn't glance at it. We'll start with the Cots du Rhône, he said. And whatever the chef recommends tonight. Brielle raised a brow. You just let him choose for you. I let people who are brilliant at what they do their job, he said, eyes flicking toward her. That's why I asked you here. You're hoping I'll fix your next merger over foie gras, he gave a faint laugh. No. I'm hoping to learn why someone with your brain is content typing minutes in a cubicle. Her stomach tightened. This isn't a job interview. I know, he said, but I still want to know. She studied him across the table. You ever heard of a woman named Elaine Carson? Yes, he didn't hesitate. She ran one of the most successful nonprofit logistics initiatives on the East Coast. She passed away about 5 years ago. That was my mom, Brielle said. I was in grad school when she got sick. I dropped out. Took care of her until the end. By the time I could think straight again, all the doors that used to be open weren't anymore. So now I take jobs with short contracts and no strings. Silas didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was lower. She changed how emergency aid moved through disaster zones. I studied one of her models when I was building my second warehouse hub. The wine arrived. They didn't toast, they just drank. So, Brielle said, setting her glass down. Are you always this direct on first dates? You think this is a date? I'm in a dress I had to steam over the shower. You're drinking wine that probably costs more than my rent. I'm pretty sure this qualifies. He smiled, but it wasn't smug. It was something quieter, warmer. I don't do a lot of firsts, he said, but tonight felt like one. The food arrived courses she didn't recognize, plated so beautifully she hesitated before touching them. Silas dug in like the artfully stacked lamb chop was a Tuesday lunch. So what about you? she asked between bites of scallop. Why Garrison and Wolfe? You could have bought your own island and disappeared. Because I don't believe in disappearing, he said, wiping his mouth with his napkin. I spent 10 years building something that worked. Now I want to build something that matters. She tilted her head. And you think corporate strategy is the path to meaning? I think people are, he said. And I think the right person can change the entire direction of a company or a life. Her fork paused midair. He didn't look away. After dinner, he walked her outside. A black car waited by the curb, sleek, shiny, and clearly his. The driver opened the door, but Silas didn't move. I'll have him take you home, he said. You're not coming. I learned a long time ago that the best things don't happen all at once. They happen when you're ready. She stepped toward the car, then hesitated. Why me? Because you're not trying to impress anyone, he said, and somehow that's the most impressive thing of all. The next day at the office, he didn't visit her desk, didn't bring coffee, didn't hover outside her meetings. He gave her space. But by late afternoon, an envelope appeared on her keyboard. No name, just her initials in clean handwriting. Inside was a single typed line. Dinner was only the beginning. Along with it, a card, black, embossed. An invitation to the Ferris Foundation Gala. A black tie event that raised millions every year and was attended by CEOs, celebrities, and politicians alike. And on the back, a handwritten addition. I'll meet you on the stairs. Midnight. When Brielle arrived at the gala 3 nights later, she wore a borrowed dress from her friend's boutique and heels she'd almost fallen down the subway stairs in. The venue was a converted opera house, glittering with chandeliers and filled with people whose names she'd seen in headlines. She didn't see Silas, not right away. She wandered beneath the frescoed ceilings and avoided champagne trays, trying to ignore the eyes that flicked toward her with curiosity. And then, as the clock neared midnight, she made her way toward the staircase. He was already there. Leaning against the marble railing, bow tie undone, hair slightly wind-blown like he'd just come from a rooftop. You came, he said. You invited me. I didn't think you'd want to be seen with someone like me in a place like this. She took a step closer. You don't exactly blend in either. His expression shifted. I wanted you to see this part of my world, not because I think you need it, but because I don't want to keep anything from you. Big step for a second date, she said quietly. It's not a date, he replied. It's a choice. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, not a ring, thank God, but something smaller. Inside was a silver pin shaped like a compass. She had one like it, he said. Your mom, I found a photo once in an article. I had this made. For you, her fingers curled around the box. Why are you doing this? Because you changed something in me, he said. And I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you. She could have said so many things, that it was too fast, that he barely knew her, that this was all absurd. But she didn't. Instead, she reached out and fixed his collar, her hands brushing the skin just above his shirt. Then don't, she said, but don't expect me to follow your script either. I wouldn't dream of it. And then, for the first time since they'd met, he kissed her, not rushed. Not showy, just a promise. And when they pulled apart, the room around them still crackled with chandeliers and music and wealth. But none of it mattered as much as the way he looked at her, as if she were the only real thing in the room. The pin was nestled in her jewelry box, untouched since the gala. Brielle hadn't worn it not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know what would happen if she did. It felt like a line she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. But the kiss, that stayed with her. It was in every quiet moment, every glance across a boardroom, every time her phone lit up and her heart jumped even when it was just a calendar reminder. She didn't hear from Silas for 3 days after the gala, not a call, not a message. Not even a passing nod in the hallways of the office where the buzz around his presence had only intensified. People speculated. He'd been seen stepping out of a town car at the governor's fundraiser. A venture deal in Singapore had his name on it. One executive even whispered he might be buying out a tech firm across the city. And still, nothing. By the 4th morning, Brielle decided to stop waiting. She marched into the strategy division's reception, ignoring the assistant's thinly veiled confusion at her presence, and asked to speak with him. "He's not in," the assistant said. "He's been working remotely this week." She didn't ask where. She just turned and left, her chest tight in a way she didn't want to name. That evening, as she was locking her apartment door to run out for groceries, a sleek black motorcycle pulled up at the curb. Silas took off his helmet, his hair wind-tossed, jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes fixed on her like he'd been holding his breath since the moment she walked away from him. "I should have called," he said. Brielle didn't move. "You didn't. I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me," he said, taking a step forward. "I don't usually let things get tangled like this." "Tangled." Her voice was sharper than she intended. "You kissed me. You gave me something that belonged to my mother's memory. And then you vanished. I had to handle something overseas," he said. "An acquisition. It came up fast. You could have said that. I didn't want to risk it sounding like an excuse." He exhaled and looked at her, not with charm but with something closer to regret. "I've spent years building a life where I don't owe anyone explanations, and now, for the first time, I hate that." She leaned against the railing, the cold metal biting through her sweater. "I don't need promises," she said. "But I do need honesty." He walked up the steps slowly, stopping just short of her. "I haven't let anyone in since I was 24, Silas said. "Not really. I've had relationships, but they were curated safe. You weren't supposed to get under my skin." "Then why keep showing up?" she asked. "Because I didn't know how not to." She looked away, heart thudding in that irritating, inconvenient rhythm that meant she was already halfway to forgiving him. He held out a second helmet. "I was hoping you'd let me show you something." She stared at it. "That doesn't even come close to qualifying as an apology." "It's not supposed to," he said. "It's time." The ride out of the city was cold and fast, wind whipping through her hair beneath the helmet, the rumble of the engine a steady thrum against her back. He didn't speak the entire trip. When they pulled off the main road, it was onto a gated property beyond the cliffs north of the city. A long gravel driveway led to a glass and steel house that looked like it had been carved into the rocks themselves. Silas cut the engine. Lights had already flickered on inside. She pulled off the helmet, stunned. "You live here." "Sometimes," he said, hanging his helmet on the bike. "Mostly when I need to think. And you brought me because this is where I go when I don't want to pretend." Inside, the house was warm and open, fireplace crackling low beside a wall of glass that overlooked the ocean. There were no gold fixtures, no Art Deco chandeliers, just clean lines, deep wood, and shelves full of books. He poured them each a drink from a bottle sitting on the kitchen island and handed her a glass. "I didn't grow up with money," he said. "My mother cleaned offices at night and worked the bakery counter during the day. I used to wait for her behind the register, doing math homework on the back of old receipts." Brielle sat on the edge of the sofa, her glass resting on her knee. "What happened?" she asked. "She died when I was 19, he said quietly. "Heart failure. One minute she was working, the next she was gone. I had no savings, no connections. Just a scholarship and a chip on my shoulder the size of a freight train. And now you're here," she said. He looked at her then, something raw in his expression. "And I still don't know how to trust that someone might stay." She set her drink down and stood. "You don't get to make that decision for me. I'm not trying to. Then stop pulling away every time something feels real." He reached out, his hand brushing hers. "I'm afraid if I let you in all the way, I'll lose you." "You will," she said. "If you keep disappearing." The silence stretched between them, taut and heavy. "I want you here," he said finally. "Not just tonight, not just when it's convenient. I want to figure out what this is. Even if it terrifies me." She looked around the space at the home he only showed to no one, at the quiet vulnerability under his confident surface. "You're going to have to let go of control," she said. "I know. And you're going to have to stop testing me like I'm going to vanish. If I give you the chance," he said. "What would you do?" She didn't hesitate. "I'd stay." He stepped closer, his hand cupping her cheek, and this time the kiss wasn't a promise, it was an answer. When morning came, she watched the sunrise from his living room, wrapped in a blanket and barefoot on the cool slate floor. He was in the kitchen, making coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Are you always up this early?" she asked. "Only when I care about what happens next." She walked over, took the cup he offered, and leaned against the counter. "So," she said, "what happens next?" He met her eyes. "Everything?" 3 weeks later, Brielle stepped off the elevator into a private gallery in Tribeca, her heels echoing quietly on polished concrete. The space was minimalist and high-ceilinged, lit only by soft spotlights illuminating massive oil canvases, each one abstract, moody, and rich with layered texture. The kind of art people either pretended to understand or paid 6 figures to pretend they did. She wasn't here for the art. Silas was standing near the far wall, his hands in his pockets, speaking with a woman in an elegant dove-gray suit. He caught sight of Brielle and excused himself, the set of his shoulders easing as he crossed the room toward her. "You came," he said quietly, stopping just close enough for her to feel the warmth of him without touching. "I wanted to see what you looked like when you weren't pretending to be the most important person in the room." He glanced toward the painting behind her. "That one's about control." The artist lost her sight halfway through the piece. She finished it by memory. Brielle tilted her head. "Sounds like someone you'd admire." "I do." She looked at him, resisting the urge to reach for his hand. "Why did you ask me here?" "Because this is the first time I've hosted something for investors and only cared about one person showing up." She exhaled slowly. "You realize how ridiculous that sounds, right?" "I do," he said. "But I stopped caring about sounding reasonable the moment you started showing up in places I didn't expect." Brielle moved past him, walking slowly along the paintings. He followed, far enough not to crowd, close enough to feel inevitable. "I got a call," she said. "From the director of operations at Westbrook Foundation." His eyes narrowed slightly. "The nonprofit accelerator. They want me to lead a new initiative, disaster response programming in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a year-long contract, paid. With full autonomy." Silas didn't speak, but his chest rose and fell like he was recalibrating. "You're taking it?" he asked finally. "I haven't said yes." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what it means for us." He stepped closer, his voice low. "It means I'll fly out whenever you want me. It means we'll find a way. It means I'll wait at every airport gate if that's what it takes." She turned to face him. "That's not realistic." "Neither was falling for someone because of a donut box," he said. "But here we are." Her throat tightened. "I'm not asking you to give it up," he continued. "This is who you are. I see it every time you walk into a room, like you've already figured out how to fix it. You don't belong behind a desk. You belong building something that changes lives. And if I try to keep you small, I'll lose you anyway." Brielle stared at him, every nerve in her body fighting between logic and the weight of what he was offering. "I don't want you waiting in terminals," she said. "I want you with me if I go." He nodded once. "Then we go," she blinked. "You'd leave everything?" "I've built enough to know I can build again, but I've never found someone like you, and I'm not going to risk losing that because I'm afraid of change." "I haven't accepted yet," she said, her voice quiet. "Then let me give you one more reason to say yes." He gestured, and a gallery assistant appeared carrying a long black case. Brielle frowned as the assistant opened it and stepped aside. Inside was a painting. Small, vibrant, familiar, her mother, Elaine Carson. Not in photo-realistic detail, but impressionist brushstrokes, warm golds and deep blues, arms outstretched in front of a map, her expression caught mid-laugh. It was the image from a newspaper profile Brielle hadn't seen since the funeral. "I commissioned it last month," Silas said. "From the artist who painted the compass piece in the gala auction. She wanted to capture who your mother was, not just what she looked like." Brielle stared at it, her breath caught somewhere between her ribs. "I'm not offering you a ring," he said. "Not yet. I'm offering you a place to start. Together, wherever that leads." She looked at him, eyes wet, heart full in a way she hadn't let herself feel in years. "I don't need a ring," she whispered. I just need to know you'll be next to me when the ground shifts. I will be, he said. Every time, the gallery around them faded. The guests, the art, the business. None of it mattered. She stepped into his arms, not because she needed to be held, but because she wanted to be, and he held her like he'd been waiting for this moment longer than he realized. 3 months later, they stood beneath a linen canopy in a village outside Nairobi, surrounded by the team Brielle had built from the ground-up engineers, field coordinators, and aid strategists. Silas wore no tie. She wore no shoes. The sun dipped low over the trees, and the wind stirred the hem of her dress as they exchanged vows written in the quiet hours between flights and field reports. He didn't promise her a perfect life. She didn't promise to stay the same. They promised to choose each other, even when the map changed. At the reception, he handed her a folded note. "Open it when you're ready." Later that night, in the quiet of their temporary house, a space with no furniture yet, just 2 sleeping bags and a window that opened to the stars, she unwrapped it. Inside was a plane ticket, but not for her, for him. One way, no return. Attached was a note, handwritten in the same steady script she now knew by heart. "Wherever you go, I'll be there." Just say the word. She didn't cry. She laughed, that same quiet laugh her mother once had, the one people called defiant because it didn't ask for permission. Then she found him asleep on his side of the floor, kissed his cheek, and whispered the only thing that mattered. "I already did." The morning rains had come early, warm, steady, and soaking the red earth outside the compound. Brielle stood by the window, her hair in a loose braid down her back, watching as the water pooled beneath the banana trees. In the distance, she could hear the early hum of generators powering the medical tents, the low chatter of Swahili between the nurses and volunteers, and the rhythmic sweep of brooms along the walkways. Behind her, Silas was barefoot in the kitchen, cracking eggs into a pan on the single-burner stove they shared. The smell of garlic and green peppers drifted through the room, mixing with the scent of the rain. "You're quiet this morning," he said, voice low and even as he stirred. "Thinking about the field audit," she shook her head slowly. "No, the report's done, just waiting for the UN rep to sign off." He plated the eggs, walked over and placed the dish in front of her on the small table by the window. "Then what's got you staring at clouds like they're about to give you answers?" She sat, pushing the fork around the edge of the food. "We've been here for 5 months, and this project, it's working. The supply chains are efficient. The local teams are trained. The satellite stations are running without oversight." Silas leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "You're saying it's time to move on." She looked up at him. "I'm saying I don't know what comes next. For the first time, I'm not running from anything. I'm not chasing someone else's legacy. I've done what I came here to do." He crossed the room and pulled out the chair across from her. "Then maybe it's time we decide together." Her heart stilled. He'd changed more than she had. The man who once kept people at arm's length now spent his days hauling clean water tanks and helping repair wind turbines with local tech teams. He'd learned how to barter at the open market, how to speak enough Swahili to make kids laugh, and how to sleep under a mosquito net without complaining once. And yet, somehow, he still looked like the man who once ran the boardroom like a battlefield. She leaned in. "I want to build something that lasts, not just a program, a life, something we can pass on someday." He didn't flinch. "Then let's break ground," she blinked. "You're serious?" "I've been researching land near Lake Naivasha, fertile, peaceful. Close enough to the region centers for you to stay involved, but far enough to be ours. I already spoke to a developer who specializes in sustainable structures. Off-grid, solar-powered, locally sourced." She stared at him, stunned. "You've been planning this?" "No," he said. "I've been dreaming about it. Planning only started when you said you wanted to stay." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't care where it is, I just want it to be with you." He held her gaze. "Then marry me again, not in front of a team or for a cause. Just you, me, and the life we're choosing." Her breath caught. "You've already married me once." "I want to do it again. This time because I can't imagine a single version of the future without you in it. She stood, her chair scraping softly against the floor, and walked to him. Then let's make it ours. 3 weeks later, on the edge of a quiet hill overlooking the lake, they said their second set of vows beneath a handmade wooden arch wrapped in eucalyptus and jasmine. There was no official, no crowd, just 2 witnesses from the village, a string of lanterns, and the kind of stillness that made time feel irrelevant. Brielle wore a dress sewn by the local seamstress, soft cotton that moved with the wind. Silas wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a thin leather bracelet she'd made him. I vow to never let the world get louder than us, she said, her hands in his. I vow to build a life where you never have to choose between purpose and love, he answered. When they kissed, the breeze picked up, scattering blossoms from the nearby jacaranda tree. They stayed on that hill until the sun dipped beneath the horizon, holding hands barefoot in the grass, watching the future unfold in front of them. In the months that followed, construction began on their home. It wasn't grand, but it was perfect: 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a wide porch that faced the water, and a guest room they quietly referred to as some days. Brielle launched a hybrid operations firm from the new office they built beside the garden, offering strategy consulting to grassroots nonprofits across the continent. Silas joined her as a partner, but insisted on keeping a hands-on role with the field projects, traveling frequently to oversee new logistics hubs they helped design. They didn't chase headlines. They didn't seek approval. They built their days around what mattered: trust, laughter, and the quiet joy of growing something together. And on the day they returned from a trip to northern Kenya to find a letter confirming their application to adopt a local orphan had been approved, Brielle cried into Silas's shoulder as he read the name aloud. A boy, 3 years old. His name was Elias. He arrived barefoot, clutching a stuffed elephant and a tattered book about stars. Brielle knelt in the dirt and opened her arms without a word. He ran to her without hesitation. Silas crouched beside them, holding both of them close. That night, as the 3 of them lay on the porch beneath a sky scattered with constellations, Elias asleep between them, Brielle glanced at Silas. "You think your mother would have liked this?" He looked up at the stars. "She would have called it more than I ever deserved." Brielle smiled, brushing a curl from Elias's forehead. "It feels like exactly what we were meant for." Silas turned to her, his hand finding hers in the dark. "No, it feels like home."